Bench talk that opened doors. Rain streaked down the crowded streets, bouncing off cracked sidewalks and puddles that mirrored the gray, indifferent sky. Amid the ceaseless hum of traffic and the hurried footsteps of people avoiding the drizzle, an old wooden bench sat quietly under the skeletal branches of a leafless tree. Its paint was chipped, the wood rough from years of weather and neglect, yet it held a certain dignity, a quiet resilience, like a patient witness to the passing lives around it. On this unremarkable afternoon, the bench would become the silent stage for an encounter that neither of its visitors could have anticipated. Ethan crouched beside the bench, his worn leather shoes soaked from the puddles, a damp newspaper clutched under one arm as if it could somehow shield him from the world. He was young, barely 24, but the lines etched into his face told stories of years spent battling invisible storms. Life had not been kind to him. After losing his parents to illness when he was just a teenager, he had drifted through foster homes, temporary jobs, and empty apartments that smelled faintly of cleaning supplies and loneliness. Ambitions that once burned bright had dimmed, extinguished by rejection after rejection. Today he was tired, not just physically, but deep in a way that reached the core of his spirit. As Ethan lowered himself onto the bench, the weight of his backpack pressing against his shoulders, he noticed the figure already occupying it. An elderly man with soft gray hair and gentle eyes sat quietly, hands folded over a cane that looked more ornamental than necessary. There was a calmness about him that seemed incongruent with the bustling chaos of the street. He watched the people pass, a faint smile playing on his lips, as if he were privy to secrets the rest of the world had forgotten. For a long moment neither spoke. The rain patted rhythmically on the leaves above, and the distant sound of traffic became a muted backdrop, almost meditative. Then, almost impulsively, the man broke the silence, not with a question or a comment, but with a simple observation. Rain always has a way of washing things clean, doesn't it? Ethan blinked, startled by the casual kindness. He wasn't used to conversations, not with strangers, not with anyone. Usually, people looked past him, avoided him, or worse, assumed his failure defined him. Something about the man's tone, soft yet deliberate, coaxed him to respond. He nodded, a small, hesitant gesture, unsure if the words would even come out. And then, inexplicably, they did. He found himself talking about his life, about the relentless waves of obstacles he had faced, about dreams deferred and doors slammed shut before he could even knock. The man listened without interruption, his eyes not judging but holding a patient warmth that Ethan hadn't realized he had been starving for. Before the words tumbled out, Ethan didn't even know he was capable of opening up. But as he spoke, the heaviness in his chest lifted fractionally, a burden shared in the safety of unassuming company. Hours seemed to compress into minutes, the bench beneath them becoming a cocoon where two souls, separated by decades, found a fragile but profound connection. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, if you feel that a single conversation can change the course of a life, pause for a moment now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. This story is for those who never lose hope, even when the world seems to. The man leaned slightly forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You know," he said, voice tinged with quiet authority, "sometimes life doesn't need a plan as much as it needs a willingness to step forward. Opportunities don't always knock twice, but they often appear when you least expect them. You just have to notice them and then have the courage to act." Ethan listened, absorbing the words like a parched plant soaking up rain. They were simple words, almost banal in their phrasing, yet delivered with such sincerity that they struck him with the force of revelation. He realized that he had spent so much time waiting for doors to open, for someone else to recognize his worth, that he had forgotten to seek the opportunities within reach, the doors he had the power to push open himself. The rain began to taper off, leaving the air crisp and the streets glistening. The elderly man reached into his coat pocket and produced a folded card. He handed it to Ethan without preamble, On it was written an address, a phone number, and a name, a local community center known for supporting young adults in career development, offering mentorship, and, importantly, believing in people who had lost their way. Ethan stared at the card, heart hammering. The gesture seemed too simple, almost too good to be true. But in that moment, hope stirred. It was fragile, tentative, but unmistakable. He knew deep down that this could be the first step toward a life he had long resigned himself to only dreaming about. For weeks after that day, Ethan hesitated, caught between fear and hope. But each time doubt crept in, he would recall the gentle eyes on that rain-soaked bench, the words that had lodged in his heart. Finally, he mustered the courage to follow through. He walked into the community center, card in hand, and was greeted by a warmth and acceptance that felt almost foreign. Here, his past was not a chain but a story to be honored and learned from. Here, he was offered guidance, training, and most importantly, belief. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Ethan immersed himself in programs, volunteering, learning, and gradually gaining the confidence that had eluded him for so long. Doors began to open, subtly at first. A recommendation here, a small project there, until one day, an internship opportunity arrived, one that had the potential to shape his future. He remembered the old man's words, how courage was needed not for the world to notice, but to notice the world himself. The real transformation, however, was not just in the opportunities that unfolded, but in Ethan himself. He discovered resilience he had not known existed, empathy he had not allowed himself to feel, and a quiet strength built from years of struggle and now fueled by guidance and support. He realized that life's bench moments, those seemingly insignificant encounters, often held the power to redirect the trajectory of an entire existence. Years later, Ethan returned to that same bench. The wooden surface was older, the paint even more chipped, but it still bore the quiet dignity of a witness. He carried a small notebook in which he had scribbled stories of gratitude, lessons learned, and hopes for the future. Sitting down, he allowed himself a moment to reflect on the chain of events set in motion by a single conversation. He thought of the man whose kindness had pierced through the gray fog of his despair, and he felt a surge of determination to pay it forward. He began to speak to strangers on benches, in parks, and in cafes, not with a pretense of grand gestures, but with attentive listening, gentle encouragement, and the quiet sharing of opportunities that could make a real difference. He learned that sometimes the most profound impact comes not from sweeping action but from the patient, compassionate presence of one human being for another. The bench had become more than wood and nails. It had become a symbol of possibility, of small moments carrying the weight of extraordinary potential. Ethan realized that life's true doors often did not announce themselves with fanfare. They appeared in the quiet spaces, in conversations that might otherwise seem fleeting, in gestures that might otherwise seem insignificant. But when recognized and embraced, these moments could reshape a future, ignite hope, and restore faith in the goodness of humanity. And so, Ethan's life blossomed, not just in achievements or recognition, but in purpose. He carried the memory of that rainy afternoon, the words of the elderly man, and the simple gesture of a card as a compass, guiding him to extend the same grace to others. He understood that the bench, silent and weathered, had held not just him, but the promise of transformation for anyone willing to listen, willing to act, willing to believe. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of small acts and the importance of believing in others, please take a moment to like, share, and comment. Let us know how kindness has changed your life, and inspire someone else to take that first step toward hope. Before you leave, drop a comment about a moment in your life that changed everything, no matter how small. Your story might just be the bench talk that opens doors for someone else. Because sometimes, the world's most extraordinary changes begin on an ordinary bench, with an ordinary conversation, and the courage to believe in the impossible. This version is about 1,500 words, fully self-contained, cinematic, and emotional, with 2 calls to action and a special request before the ending. If you want, I can also craft a YouTube-ready thumbnail prompt and search engine optimization description to pair perfectly with this story for maximum engagement. Do you want me to do that next?